Okay, great.
It's being recorded.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. Yep, it is recording. Beautiful. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
No problem. Thank you guys.
How have the other trainings gone?
Really good. The CSMs have had great feedback, and I think it sparked some discussions with marketing even. So we have Matt hopefully joining the call today, and he's always looking for easy ways to help us promote our partners.
Mm-hmm.
So had a lot of ideas after the trainings. The CSMs have come up with kind of a top target list of customers, and it's easier for them to do that when they're talking about the decision maker and the activation process and all those questions, because keep in mind they do talk about a lot of partners, their clients, so that's why the repetition can be really good.
Okay.
Yeah, so
very good.
And also we've got like a lot more moving on to 7 and successfully on 7, and activated with some of our other revenue generating partners, so they're in a much better position to take a look at this. So it's always kind of changing that landscape.
Yeah. Good. So the CSMs will be at Intex, you said, some of them?
Yes, they will, and I'm sure they'll be excited to see you guys there.
Great. In my hometown.
Yeah, that's awesome for you.
Although I think I'm going to stay in a hotel a couple nights. Just it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I'm just going to run and get some coffee. I'll be right back.
No problem.
I'm back.
I'm getting a couple messages from people. I think there's some winter weather traffic happening on the way home from daycare and such.
Okay, no problem.
But despite who we get on the call today, this is going to be an important recording for us. So
okay.
Not to worry about that.
I suppose we'll wait till we have at least one person.
Good idea.
So how many? So if I look under management participants, that's how many are on?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. It's good the 3 of us are on.
Yeah. I know there's been just so much going on lately, so we'll give a minute or two to just get everyone on.
Well, it's only just 10 o'clock now, according to my official Apple time.
Yeah.
Yes. go. No. John Finn is on.
Hey, John.
Hi, guys.
Hello, and Mr. Grassi is on.
Hello.
The two Johns.
A couple others. We'll just give another quick minute.
Yeah, if we need to. Whatever works for you guys. I mean, the most important thing is we have good attendance.
Hey, Darcy.
Hello.
All right. I think we can probably kick it off. We've got definitely a couple others joining, but we've got the recording, so we will pass that along to everyone. So we have the wonderful Digonex team on the line. We've got Harry, Chris, and Greg, and they are going to show us all about Digonex today. I know there are a couple people who maybe haven't seen it before. As we've done with our past partner trainings, please feel free to ask questions throughout, because I think it's really valuable to have discussions on any topics that are relevant for you guys. So Harry, I will pass it over to you, and thank you guys so much for teaching us about Digonex today.
Well, thank you, and thanks for you guys, you folks that are on the phone. My name is Harry Tomasides, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Digonex. Greg Lowen, who's the CEO of Digonex, who some of you have met, is also on the line, as well as Chris Pohl, who was in Austin last year, and he's going to be going through a demo of Seats, our portal, and so we're excited to show some of the things for some of you. You've seen some of this material, although we have some updates with Mirvish, and then we recently launched Denver Center, and which is going well. So just wanted to talk through some of the how that's going, and really want to kind of dig in on some of the clients that we've talked to, where they are in our pipeline, and as well as kind of talk through some of the differentiations between what we offer and that that your clients have access to versus what they're doing now. So with that, we'll get into this. And can everybody see my screen okay? We're good? Good. We'll also talk a little bit more about the implementation, like a timeline, and because that question comes up as well, and also what our fee structure generally looks like. That I think is going to be new information for some of you guys. So, and then any kind of Q&A as well. So with that, just for those who don't know, Digonex we are dynamic pricing experts. That's where our expertise is. We have a team of PhD economists. We have 4. We're in the process of hiring a 5th. And that really is the kind of one of the pieces of secret sauce of what we do. And what we do is develop customized and automated dynamic pricing solutions or algorithms for our clients. We have a price management portal, which for your clients, I think is really, really important, so they can have full visibility of the price recommendations that we're giving, and they have control over their pricing, and they have an opportunity to review and approve and modify any kind of price recommendations before they go live. Chris is going to show you this in more detail. Additionally, there are some revenue projections and attendance and capacity projections baked into that. So where we really specialize in how we're working with Mirvish and with DCPA and the conversations that we're having with your clients, it's really about single tickets for all price level, all performances, all productions, and we can do this all simultaneously. And we work with your clients before, so as we're launching it, as well as after the launch. So the way we're structured is, and probably similar to you guys, once we launch, there's an account manager that's assigned to an account. So for instance, Chris Paul, who's on the call, he's the account manager for DCPA and Mirvish, and so he's the day-to-day person. Additionally, there's an economist, a PhD economist that's assigned to the client as well. So they're highly accountable to the results, and very really we work shoulder to shoulder with the clients. We work with a lot of different industries, but for you guys in particular, what's most important is live entertainment and sports. And typically, the revenue lift in the first year is anywhere between 8 and 20%, and that really goes for any of the industries that we work with. Here are some of the live entertainment clients we work with. Some of these are familiar, some of these are new. For those of you in Toronto, the National Ballet, we just launched them. So those are the ones that we're working with. We have a lot more in the pipeline, including some that we're going to talk about today. And so I think the thing that I want to focus on is what your clients, most of them, are doing now versus what's the value proposition that Digonex brings to the table, okay? And so if you think about pricing strategy as a pyramid, the most common approach for performing arts and live entertainment and sports to an extent as well is working dynamic pricing manually. So you're manually updating prices. And so what we have with Digonex is we're going to use an algorithm using many factors and then automating that process to where they don't just, input it manually. And so we're going to dive a lot deeper into that. And hopefully when your clients are asking about, well, what's the difference? Hopefully these next two slides are really designed to give you guys some talking points to walk away with today. So the first thing is, again, the most common approach is manual dynamic pricing. So what does that mean? Well, that means they may be using some predictive tools or some spreadsheets maybe to manually update those pricing, having to go into model pricing and manually update those prices. What we have found that typically capacity is really, in all honesty, the only factor that's determining the price update. So, at 70%, they're going to go up $5. And Greg is going to speak more about Mirvish, and Mirvish actually transitioned from manual dynamic pricing where, they may have been taking prices from, up $10 at a time. And so that's what manual dynamic pricing is. So our feeling is this is going to lead to missed revenue opportunities because of some limited factors. So I think if you were to dig deeper what are some of the common challenges with a manual process? Number one, it takes a ton of time. And these are just quotes that we get in talking to live entertainment clients over the last few years. It takes a lot of time. And therefore, it's very difficult to price every performance. So, we have, there's a client of ours, that has 200 performances, and prior to using us, it turns out that they were only pricing just a handful of their what they viewed as their highest demand performances. And so they were leaving a lot of money on the table because they weren't pricing everything, because it took a lot of time. There's still, even with any kind of analytical tools, they still feel like they're making an educated guess. And even the conversation I had with DCPA earlier this week, they said just that, that they were just, licking their finger, putting their finger in the wind and making an educated guess. There's no simple way to update prices. So that is something obviously we have solved with the integration that we have with you guys, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then, the other thing is they know that they should be taking other factors into account than just sellout ratio. But, how do you take those in? How do you factor those in? So that's where our economists come in and help that process. And then this is another big one, is not noticing changes in the market soon enough to fully take advantage of them. So for instance, there was a prospective client that I was talking to, and they had a very successful, year after year. This was a very successful production. And so they decided they wanted to add a couple other performances to this particular production. And so they knew, they felt in their heart of hearts it was going to be really successful. Well, as time went on, they realized that they weren't selling tickets as anticipated, but they were stubborn as to make changes to that. So in this not noticing changes in the market soon enough to fully take advantage of them, the algorithm is pretty agnostic. And so it does notice those changes in the market, and it's going to make those price recommendations a lot quicker than a mere human. So just to take these things a step further, on why a manual process or for sports flexing leaves lots of money on the table. Number one, it's limited in scope. So if you can't price every show, you're missing opportunities. So there's a real limited scope with us. You can price 200 performances, all price levels simultaneously, all the time, and looking at that data on a daily basis. Again, you're looking at a few factors. So the price changes are really capacity only. It overlooks a lot of other of those key drivers of demand. And it's really just a myopic focus if you're just focusing on premium only. And this is really with what we see in sports, where you're just going to focus on premium tickets. So it's, if you're only looking at the most expensive seats, your opportunities are going to hit the ceiling quickly, okay? And then there's no downward pricing. So this one down here, so there are clients that really have fear of lowering prices because they can't really track the impact. So number one, we can track that impact of taking prices down and the positive impact that it has on revenue. So that's very, very important with dynamic pricing. And then really that there are relative prices are overlooked. So the manual process are missing optimization between the price levels. And so as Greg is going to talk about Mirvish, I think that's one of the things that they really, really have seen the impact is taking the relative price in between the price levels, and then finally limited price points. So if you're using kind of fixed price increments or flex inventory between the same static levels, you're just missing out on opportunities. So between these three slides that we looked at, as you think about your clients and kind of the talking points and what the difference is between what they're doing now versus what you have at your fingertips and what they have at their fingertips through Digonex, hopefully these these points here are going to help you guys out. So with that, I'll pause with any questions because I think this is a good time to reflect on what you're hearing from your clients, and hopefully this is helpful. Any commentary? Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep going.
I'm sorry, it's Sarah. How are you?
Hi, Sarah.
Hello. So my biggest takeaway from this slide, because there's a lot of options, is really to really talk to the customers, not necessarily about this can be automated, and yes, you'll be able to look at it and evaluate it, because I think that that's been a big benefit and a fear point of customers, is that they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, you guys are just going to take over my pricing, I'm not ready for that. But you guys step them through that so they have an opportunity to kind of assess it. But to me, the biggest thing is to say that the biggest takeaway from this slide for me is to really say, have you been doing anything with your lower price seats? Because if you haven't been, you're missing out. But also, which shows are softer, and why wouldn't you consider lowering those prices to get more people in the seats? I mean, to me, those are the biggest takeaways in terms of upselling this to customers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good.
So, very helpful slide. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, thanks. This is Greg from Digonex. The purpose of this slide, we're often, when we in live entertainment, and I'm sure you folks have come across this as well, the concept of dynamic pricing, the value of dynamic pricing is well understood. What we often hear when we're talking to folks is, well, we do this internally already. So why do we need to pay a vendor to do this for us? And these are when we've sat down and spoken with others doing it internally and to tell us how you do it, we can see first of all, we're thrilled that they're doing it, because if someone isn't going to work with a firm like ours, we absolutely think they should do what they can internally. They will see value from it if they apply thought and good analysis to it. But there's a whole lot of gaps in a typical internal manual process that leaves a lot of money on the table. There is huge value, opportunity, upside from doing it in a more robust and automated way, and that's some of what we're trying to highlight here on this page 8. And that last point about the relative prices is a really important one. A lot of clients do what's called flexing, which I'm sure you're familiar with, where they've got maybe 5 established price levels, and what they do for their dynamic pricing strategy is they'll just shift inventory from one price level to another, which can be helpful, but it's still a very basic approach, because you're still locking yourself into those 5 preordained price points. And what we find is that an awful lot of the value in dynamic pricing comes from the optimization of the relative prices in between those price levels, and that doing that really well is something that's virtually impossible with a manual process, because of the analytics that you need to really understand those substitution effects that are so important. So, but thanks for the comments.
Okay, and Sarah, to your point on control, we are gonna address that if that's something that you've been hearing. Hopefully, you and the team will be able to walk away with a good response on that, because they do stay in control of their pricing, and it's not like the algorithm just takes over and that's it. So let's go through these. So in terms of using an algorithm, the first thing is, they are gonna get stronger revenue growth. So it's improving the optimization, and we're able to go in there and price every price level for each performance or game throughout the entire season. And it's doing it on a regular basis. It could be 3 times a week or every day. And again, there's more input factors and variables that we're looking at, which we'll go through in a second. And then again, there's that, because we're using an algorithm, there's that recognition and a lot more precision than what they're doing now by using just, hey, we're 70% sold out, so I'm going to take the price up $5. Ours is a lot more precise than that. The second thing is, it is going to be a lot easier for them. Right now, if they're doing dynamic pricing, and even if they're pricing every price level for every performance, they're having to gather data, they're having to look at spreadsheets, and then they're having to go back in and manually update those prices for every price level for every performance. And so we're able to, the algorithm, and we take that off of them. So we're able to do that for them, and the algorithm automates all that through the integration that we have with you. And then there's this idea of client control, and this is what I'm talking about, Sarah. So again, the recommendations that we provide, and then Chris is going to go into this in more detail with a demo, is the recommendations. Really, it's not to take over what their judgment is, and not to replace that, because they can approve them and override them. The other thing is, as we go through our scoping process with the clients set the rules and constraints. So if there's a production and price levels where you don't want the price, you don't want the tickets to go under this price or over that price, there are minimum maximum prices where the clients can set those constraints. And again, all prices, the way it's defaulted is all prices must be approved by the client. Now, there are some clients who just trust our recommendations after working with us a while, and they can go into auto accept. But the way it's defaulted is all clients must approve the prices. All clients must approve the prices. Okay, so I'm going to take you through 2 things here. The first part is developing the algorithm. So this is before we launch, okay? So the first thing that we ask for, our economists, is, well, we're going to ask for 3 years of historical data, just so we can get an idea of how the consumers and guests have reacted in the past to the theater and to different types of performances. So that's number 1. Number 2, and this is a very, very important part of the process, is we have what are called scoping questions, and they're developed by our economists, and so we ask our prospective clients to answer these questions, typically about 25 questions, and the more detailed they are, the better they are. And then the answers to those questions are going to help determine the customization of the algorithm. Okay, so that's a very, very important point. So Sarah, to your point, where the client maybe isn't going to feel in control or whatever with what we're doing, we ask a lot of questions up front to help, mold the algorithm to what their needs are, highly customizable. And then from there, we put in some other factors that we're going to look at in a second here, and then from there the economists build the algorithm. So that's what we just got done doing with DCPA is this, and then we just launched them a couple weeks ago. Okay, So from there, we get asked a lot of, about what are the factors that we use. And so this certainly is not an exhaustive list, and sometimes we use all of these, sometimes we don't, and there may be other factors as well. But I just want you guys to get an idea of some of the things that we look at. So anywhere from, how have the guests and the patrons reacted to past price changes? What are the different characteristics between performances and productions? Any kind of marketing programs are super helpful to inform the algorithm. Weather is an important input. Any kind of, regional demographics or revenue goals, attendance goals. These are all things that are really important. And from there, the algorithm is going to evaluate three things. So it's always going to be projecting demand on the performance and the production and all the different price levels. It's always going to be looking at that, and also what's the price elasticity. So that's kind of to Greg's point of, what's the in between of the different price levels, and what are the consumers and the guests going to be reacting to, and then the substitution effects between price zones. So we don't want to be cannibalizing, say, orchestra for mezzanine. And so the algorithm is going to be able to recognize that more than any kind of manual process has. And so from there, that's when we come up with the optimal price for that particular performance and the particular price level, etc. So, Greg, do you have any other commentary on this slide?
No, I think you covered it well, Harry.
Okay. All right. And so, so from here, for those who haven't seen this, want to talk about what the integration looks like between Digonex and AudienceView. So number one, so on a regular basis, so Digonex uses the AudienceView API to run the sales and availability reports. So on a daily basis, we are going to pull the sales and availability reports into our algorithm. Okay, from there, that information goes into the algorithm. The algorithm is going to look at the sales and availability reports, as well as all those other factors that we just talked about, and from there, it's going to determine the optimal price. Okay, from there, it goes into seats. So it's our price management portal, and so that's what Chris is going to show you in a second here. And then from there, once the prices are approved, or they're approved, then it goes into model pricing, and then the model pricing is updated with the new prices via the API, and then it gets published onto the website. So what's in blue here, that's where the automation comes in. The automation is two ways. It is pulling the sales and availability reports into our algorithm, and then pushing the prices into model pricing, where they automatically get updated. Okay?
This is John. Sorry if I just missed this, but is this happening on a daily basis?
Yes. I mean, it can. It's up to the client, but it can happen on a daily basis, where we are pulling in the sales and availability reports. And so how often are we doing it for Mervish and DCPA, Chris and Greg?
Well, we pull the data every day, 7 days a week, regardless of whether there's a price review. For Mervish, they have all of the productions that we're pricing in review Monday through Friday. For DCPA, we do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Gotcha. And then when they accept the pricing, does it get pushed out in that moment, or is it like overnight it gets pushed out?
That varies by client. In both of these cases, well, they're slightly different. At DCPA, it's slightly after midnight, their mountain time, their local time, when prices are updated. For Mervish, it happens at 4 a.m. The day after the review.
the timing of the actual push is set by the client. It's a configurable element for them.
Gotcha. Do you guys have a preference one way or another, or is it really whatever the client feels is best?
It's really whatever the client feels is best. Principally, most clients do it sometime in the overnight because they don't want a patron to be in a situation where they're in the middle of a transaction and the price changes on them while they're doing that. So that most end up doing it, I think, for sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. But every once in a while, a client wants to get a price live sooner, and then we figure out how to make that happen for them.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think if you reflect back on those other slides about manual dynamic pricing versus what this integration does, I think it's pretty helpful to, I think you can use that as a backdrop to say, okay, this is how all this works. So, any other questions on the integration?
Hi, it's Sarah again. I know when this was originally designed, it was for 6.8, but with the advent of 7, we've got fields that they can put their budget numbers and certain goals in, and it evolves. Does the integration take that into account, or do they need to do that within your platform? Did I ask it wrong?
So we know, and Chris and Greg, you may want to pipe in here, but I believe that we know what the budget numbers are going into the launch, correct? And so that's already built into the algorithm.
It varies by the solution type of what the economists want, but we ask for the budget stuff up front. If it is going to be available going forward in AudienceView, we'll have our data team start looking at that to pull the information out directly.
Well, right, because I know that the way we're really positioning 7 and using the goals, the fact that we could get, I'm getting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse here, but I know if we can get our marketing teams into the system and or using some automation to update those, because as you know, budget numbers are budget numbers, but goals can be very different. So if they have larger or loftier goals, for you guys to be able to have access to that as that evolves would be really interesting to see if that would change anything. So sorry, side note, I just wanted to see if that was included in the integration, but it sounds like it needs to be reviewed. Thanks.
Okay, but that's cool to know that exists though, Sarah, so thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else have any questions on the integration? Okay, so I'm gonna now I have to do this sharing thing. Okay, so I'm gonna hand this off to Chris Paul, and who is gonna go through the demo of Seats. And I'm making you host, Chris. Did you get it?
Thanks, Harry. Can everyone see a different screen now?
I'm still seeing the PowerPoint.
Yeah, me too. Do I need to stop sharing?
Yeah, you probably need to stop sharing.
There we go.
And I'm sorry, I'm asking another question, but so far with either Mirvish and or Denver, is this something that the IT team would be looking at, or have you found that it's primarily a marketing person who's working on this? I'm just curious who your primary user is in looking at this.
Now, is your question once it's launched on a day-to-day basis, or is your question as we're onboarding?
Onboarding, I would expect I'm going to say more of the operational IT people to be involved to make sure everything's working, but it's more of the day-to-day. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, so it's I mean, my experience, and Chris, you can, but it's marketing. And so I was talking to Simona DCPA. This was the other day, and I don't know if you know Simona or not, but she worked with Yvonne.
Yes.
And she said, she goes, the really good thing is I'm not hearing from anybody really that much. In the IT, we're not really hearing from anybody at marketing, since this is launched. He goes, Harry, that's a really good thing. So, so hopefully that kind of illustrates and answers your question. They were definitely involved in the onboarding, but their folks are Alicia, I think, and John maybe are
Okay.
the ones that are really involved in updating the prices.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so can everyone see the price delivery portal page now?
Yes.
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 Okay. So whatever review cycle that the client wants, they'll get their review can be available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day of the week if that's what they want. Some of them don't want it that often, depending upon what it is we're pricing. But this is what they see when they log into the system. They don't have to remember what their review cycle is. Every time a new set of prices is available, whoever they've designated on their end gets an email notification that prices are available for review. That email will also contain a CSV file of all the details of what I'm about to show you in the review. And then when they publish the new prices, there's another CSV file that's generated via email that tells them the results of that review, what they did in that review. They won't have to look back through their email to find out what they did 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago. That's always contained in seats in the completed review section of the menu. But where we are, the default view of the menu when they log in is the review groups, which is what you see here. I've set up 3 different review groups just to show you how it's done. In the case of Mirvish and DCPA, because we are pricing runs of musicals or plays, what they see is we break it out by theater, by production. Other performing arts clients or sports clients, a sports client would have the entire season in one price group unless they wanted to break it up differently. But that's completely customizable by the client. But what you see is this is what they see when they log in, and this default view gives them kind of a quick overview, a quick look at what their price recommendations are during this cycle. So in each price group, you'll see this is for Hello Dolly. You'll see the name of the event or the performance. You'll see the date of the performance. And then these changes columns are our recommendations during this review cycle. So if it's highlighted in green, it means we're making price increase recommendations. If it's highlighted in this pinkish red, it means we're recommending a price decrease. And the number relates to the number of price zones or price levels that we're recommending a change on. If there's nothing highlighted in the changes columns, that means for that particular performance, we're not making a recommendation up or down, or as the economists often say, the price recommendation is to leave the prices where they are. Then over here on the far right, you'll see there's a countdown clock. I mentioned right at the top that they can have the review open for a designated window for however long they want during the day. And that's what the countdown clock represents, is how much longer they have to complete this review today. And as Harry mentioned, the client always has complete control. So when this countdown clock gets to 0, if they haven't done the review, it just rejects our recommendations during that review cycle. And then the CSV file that's generated at the end will show that all prices were rejected by the system. Below that, you'll see there's a view column. On the far right is the details view, and I'm just going to click on that. And that opens up the details of this particular performance. So you'll have the name of the performance, the date, and the time, and then you'll have our recommendations and how people do the actual review. We also include weather, so usually within a week or a week and a half of an event, the weather is populated in. That may come into play for things that are, in a climate that has heavy winters or things like that. When we've done things on Broadway, there have been shows canceled because of hurricane warnings. We also have some outdoor venues, especially with professional baseball and things like that. Weather might be a factor that might hamper things. But below the weather, what you see are the price zones. And this is stuff that we set up and match with however they've set it up in AudienceView. So however a client sets something up, their price zones and their model pricing. That's what we would show here, or any way they want to designate it, but that's what we see. And then we have all the other details that inform the pricing as far as sales and inventory, min-max parameters, and I'll go through that. The first column here, you'll see two numbers for sales. The number on the left are the number of sales that have happened since your last price review. So if this is a, let's say Monday through Friday, it means there were 2 tickets sold for this price zone yesterday. And then on the right-hand side of the slash are the total number of sales that have happened since this ticket went on sale to the public. And so that's how the breakdown of sales. So 2 yesterday, 108 total. And then inventory is a similar kind of breakdown. On the left-hand side of the slash are the total number of tickets that are still available for this price zone. And then on the right are the holds. And this is all data that we're pulling out in that normal cycle out of AudienceView, so that every time the solution runs, it has the most up-to-date information that we're presenting here. Then the next 2 columns are the min and max parameters that the client sets. Simply put, it's the lowest they're willing to go to sell this ticket, and the max is the highest they're willing to go. It was mentioned earlier that every client has a client services team, someone that's part of my group assigned to them. And if at any time a production or a client is hitting up against the min and max bounds, then we initiate a conversation to say, you may want to change what these parameters are, if they can do that. Sometimes, if it's a short run and they're hitting up against the max parameters and they don't want to go up, sometimes our recommendation will be, can you add more shows to this production? And we've done that with Mervish, where they've added an additional week of performances and also sold those out at maximum prices. So it's beneficial for us to have an additional team to not just let the solution run on what we've been given, but also to have some kind of consultation if necessary. The next column is the base price, what this ticket went on sale for originally when it was first available. The current price is what it's currently being sold for to the public, and then the new price is our recommendation during this price review cycle. I'll also point out that whatever zone that you have highlighted in this view up here is what you also see in this price change history. So, you not only know what the base price was, but you know what the current price is. You know if the price changed in between any of those, but also because you only know what happened since the last review, be it yesterday or a week ago or 2 days ago. There's also on this price change history, the graph, each dot represents a day, and they can go back and see how many sales happened on a particular day and at what price. The red dot represents our recommendation for today. So it has no sales because this isn't an active price yet until it's been approved. But then that's what can happen. So you have the clients have 3 options that they can take on our recommendation. They can accept our recommended price, or they can reject it. If they reject it and do nothing, it will stay at the current price. But you'll notice that an override box also opens up when you click the reject box, and that gives them the opportunity to put in any price that they want into that override box. Now, I purposefully went outside the min and max parameters to show you that that not only limits our recommendations for this price zone, it also is a safety feature for clients to keep them from putting in an override price that is outside the min and max bounds. So you certainly don't want to sell a ticket that you meant to sell for, let's say, 99 or 89 for 59, or let's say you forgot one of the numbers altogether, $9. So I'm going to say no, and it clears it out. Now they can override a price if they wanted to make it $105. They can say yes, and that will be something that they can save and override that price. They can also change the min and max parameters at any time simply by double clicking on it, and a dialog box opens that allows them to change what those parameters are. So I'll just go ahead and make that one higher, and you'll see that now the override fits within that. But they can do it either way. If they want to change the maximum price across the board for 40 productions, they don't have to do that in seats one at a time. They can simply contact their client services rep, and we can do that on the back end for them. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to reject that decrease, and we're going to accept this other increase, and we're going to save that change. And when I close out of this dialog box, what you now see is the status for this particular event that we were in is now showing as reviewed. which means those prices will be pushed through at the time of publish, whether they push the publish button or wait for the countdown clock to time out. And then all these other recommendations, if they don't act on those, will be rejected during this price cycle. So the default action is to reject our recommendations if they haven't been reviewed, but once they have been reviewed, whatever the action taken by the client, that's what will happen. But anything else that's showing the status is not reviewed would be rejected upon publish. That's one of the ways that clients do the price review. You'll also notice there's a next button once you're in this detailed view again, and you can click on it and it takes you into the next day. And the client doesn't have to click all these buttons. If they want to just accept them, they can click the accept button and you'll see that now says accept, save the changes, close it, and you'll see that one's now reviewed. Another way, sometimes as clients get more comfortable, they want to speed up the review process even more. So they can go through and they can simply click the next button and you'll see their previous button is here now that we're past the first event. They can go back and forth. They can look at what the recommendations are throughout the entire price group and they can say, yes, these all look good. Yes, these look good. This is what we want to do. And they can go back to this default view and you'll see that there are now checkboxes next to the performance. They can simply accept and reject right here in the default view as well. So now you'll see that that's entirely reviewed for that price group. They can move on to the next price group or skip down to the one below it. But you can see that no matter how they've set up the venue, if it's different theaters that they're in, we set up seats to match that. We set up however they're needing things. We talk with the clients about how they manage their holds when they're going to be released so that the economist can set the parameters on the solutions to be prepared for when certain hold types might be released to the general public. But that's the quick and dirty overview of how clients do the review. We've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. In fact, most of our clients, I do an initial training with them to show them how to do this. They get their Seats Users Guide, and 9 times out of 10, if they're adding a new user 2 or 3 months later, I ask them if they wanted me to do a training when they add that person, and they usually just say, no, we're good. Everyone here knows how to use this well enough. We'll just show them how to do it ourselves. So that's the quick and dirty version. I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but we let the client have full control of whether or not a price goes into AudienceView.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions on that?
No questions, but I'll say it's pretty impressive and pretty cool. As
Awesome.
someone who studied economics in college, it's like, I don't know, it's fun, I think.
Cool. All right, Chris. So
let's turn it back to you, Harry.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I am the host now, and can you turn off your screen? You're reviewing Chris polls. Hold it. Share screen. Can you turn off your screen share? Oh, thank you. Okay. So, hold it. Sorry, folks. All right, so can you guys see this again? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's, Greg, I'll drive this, but if you can, Greg works closely with Aubrey at Mirvish, and so I think if you can walk through Mirvish, and then I'll talk a little bit about DCPA.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Harry. Well, I think folks, sometimes when we present this, the folks we're presenting it to don't know a lot about Mirvish. I'm sure everyone on this call does, so you don't need a whole lot of background on who they are or their significance. But they've clearly been our first AudienceView client. We launched with them in the fall of 2017, so we're approaching a year and a half or so of working with them. And we've worked with them on a whole variety of different productions. We're now engaged with them in all 5 of their theaters. I think, as most of you know, they just signed a long-term lease for the Elgin Theater, where they're moving Come From Away over to shortly. And so we've had a pretty broad base of experience with them, and work with shows with different types of goals. So for the most part, they're focused on, as a for-profit private entity, they're focused on revenue maximization. But there are a number of productions where they've come to us and said, this one is more about putting butts in seats and making sure the house is full. Or sometimes, frankly, they've come to us in the middle of an on-sale period and said, we thought this one was about revenue maximization, but it turns out it's about getting the butts in seats. And so we've been able to adjust how we run the solutions to reflect those different goals for them over time. But you can see some of these images of the types, the variety of the different productions that we've worked with them on. Forward, Harry. So far, I think, and I'm sure many of you have spoken with Aubrey or other folks from Mirvish, the implementation went very well. The whole notion of patrons being upset about prices moving around a lot just has not materialized at all, which is frankly consistent with our experience with all of our clients. Patrons adapt to this very, very well because they see it in so many other aspects of their lives. The results have been quite strong, somewhere between high single digit to 20% or more revenue lift based on the price adjustments that have been made. And one question we often get is, how quickly, how long will it take once we go live for us to start seeing benefit? And there's perhaps a concern that it might take 6 months or a year of running the solution to actually get a handle on things and start to see impact. Well, most of our clients generally start to see impact the very first day we start sending price recommendations. And in Mirvish's case, they more than recoup their total annual investment from the first year in less than the first 6 weeks. So they're a very happy client. We're on our first renewal period with them and are hoping this will be certainly a long-term, mutually beneficial relationship. Let's move on. One of the interesting things, that 9 to 20% is based on some internal assessment that we've done, but given Mirvish's scale, they've done a couple of internal A/B tests, one of which we're going to share with you today. This one was pretty interesting. One of the shows we've been working on, and those of you in Toronto probably won't have to work hard to figure out which one this is. It's a very, very popular, strong selling, long-running production. The first run of shows was already on sale prior to Digonex being retained to provide automated dynamic pricing. And so it kind of created this natural laboratory of how did those first 48 performances do that used just the internal price adjustment processes that Mirvish had in place versus the first 48 performances that used Digonex's dynamic pricing. And this was actually some work that Mirvish did to do their own internal assessment. And the results are on this page, and 2 points to highlight. One on the right just makes the macro point that revenues in the Digonex priced shows were approximately 15% higher than in the other shows. Both runs had near sellout. They were sold out at 99 point some odd %. So the houses were full in both cases, but the revenues from the Digonex priced productions were significantly higher. And then just as interesting, and this gets to that point about the optimization of prices in between price levels. You can see on the post pricing, which is where the Digonex price shows, that certainly the peak price, that $250 price, was higher by about 10% than the $225 that was the peak price in the market prior to Digonex pricing. But an awful lot of the value, as you can see, was in between. So that getting the premium pricing right is often an important part of the solution, but there's generally a whole lot of opportunity by optimizing those in between prices. And you can see just a lot more of the tickets were sold in that lower price range. But what we found we were able to do by optimizing the relative prices is encourage folks to buy slightly more expensive tickets in the next level up than they might have otherwise. So that was a big part of the story, and I think that Aubrey uses the phrase "optimizing the in-between," a big part of the value creation story, and we've seen this come true in many of the other productions that we've been working on.
Thanks, Greg.
No problem.
So DCPA is it's definitely a new implementation for us. But I thought it would be helpful just to walk through a little bit of work, what we've done to date. So, just like Mervish, they were doing manual dynamic pricing, or as Simone put it, they were putting a finger in the wind and guessing on the price. And so I think this has been helpful for them. They just launched with us. And they've applied dynamic pricing to 6 productions. They're all in the Buell. And Simone, they did just request a proposal for the 1920 season for Broadway. Not at theater at this point because I think they're having some renovations, but it will be for Broadway and many more productions than the ones that we're doing now. The implementation, like I said earlier, has gone smoothly. Just the mere fact that Simone says, I don't hear very much from Alicia and John. And she goes, that's a good thing. So it did go smoothly. And I think they were the first ones actually to go on 7, because Mervish, I don't think, is on 7. So they were the first ones to go on 7. And she said one interesting thing is she said, the price recommendations that we're providing to them have really pushed them, meaning that they're maybe more aggressive and maybe more often than they are used to. I think especially more often. And so she said, but that's a good thing. And so she goes, just having that intelligence and not putting their finger in the wind, I think is giving them comfort. So, we're looking, they're evaluating 2 pieces of criteria. Is number 1, what's the incremental revenue lift? And it's a little early in the game, quite frankly, to see what that would be. But we're keeping an eye on that. And then, are they comfortable with our price recommendations? So more to come on that, but I'll be getting something to Simone for Broadway only by the end of this week. And hopefully this gives you guys some insight as to, the other types of shows that we're working on with them.
So this is John. I started working with DCPA probably a few months ago now, and I know that this was kind of going on in parallel with me getting to know the account. And I just wanted some of the feedback that I've gotten from them, it felt, generally it's all been extremely positive, and the stuff that you're saying about where they're at now and the marketing team being out of their hair or whatever, they've echoed that to me as well, which is really great feedback. It felt like the implementation, though, was a little bit awkward in terms of getting it off the ground, and they didn't seem entirely clear as to what permissions and reports and stuff they needed to add up. I'm not sure that AudienceView was totally clear, so I'm wondering if you had any feedback on that as well, as we start to look at other clients to get off the ground, ways that we could iron that out.
Sure.
A little bit.
Sure.
I'm actually going to jump in there because Denver was my account before, and I think the sale process, in addition, I think they've been. I think that it's been over a year since you guys first engaged with, if I'm correct. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I went out last April to see them in person, but yeah.
So the process to get them committed, as much as we'd love it to be a little quicker, because they are a not-for-profit entity and just the way their organization functions, getting some feedback from you also about why that process might have taken long. And again, I'm not saying it's you guys per se, but it's more us, so that if we can help clear the way. So it's it's the sales process, but additionally it's the, to John's point, the implementation process. What can we do collectively to make that better?
Well, I think number 1, yes, it took a very long time, and this is not untypical of of what we've seen, not only with DCPA, but with other organizations as well, because you know, we're kind of changing how they're doing things. You know, they've been doing things one way and then transitioning and making this leap into a whole nother way of running their business, an important way of running their business. So I think that's number one. Number two, you know, we were really in the middle of their year for all intents and purposes. If I'm meeting with them in person for the first time in April, they're kind of far down the road with their budgeting process. And so, you know, once we got them to commit, and it took forever, and I don't have all the answers to that, to be honest with you. But I think part of it was in season and trying to figure out what pricing model they were going to use. I think the other thing too, as I'm thinking about this, Sarah, so what they were unclear on was, you know, are we going to be able to get the producer for Cats, Anastasia, Wicked, Fiddler on the Roof, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Hello Dolly all to commit to saying we are going to dynamically price all these. So I think in their mind, they needed to figure out, okay, how are we going to manage this with our producers? And I think that was part of their learning process as well. What was interesting for this year is you know, Simone asked me for a price for everything, and I think it's going to be an all-in price. And so what I asked her when I talked to her the other day was, I said, if you're asking me for everything, it seems like you guys are comfortable on how you're working with your producers with this, and she answered in the affirmative. So I think that was part of it as well. But I think that's a little bit of a blind area for us that we're trying to figure out as well. And Greg, maybe you have some insight into that as well.
Well, I heard there's a different. So you're right. Sometimes the sales cycle can be quite long, and I think part of the reason we're all on this call today is to figure out what can we do to shorten it. But I heard there was another element of the question, which is even once the contract is signed, how do we make the implementation, that timeline from signed contract to first price delivery, how do we shorten that cycle and make that as efficient as possible? And I think there's a few things here, and there's other folks on the operations side of our business who aren't on this call who can probably provide a little more technical detail, and it's probably a discussion that's a good next step coming out of this call. But one, as Harry mentioned, this was the first implementation on AV7, so I think there was some additional work on the integration that needed to take place, and on our side, a little bit of more. There's figuring out the data structures and the like. One step in our process that seems to always take a lot of time, and this isn't specific to the AudienceView ecosystem, this is across the board, is because we work with data at the level of the individual transaction, we always do our best to validate the data. So we get it at that very minute level of detail. We try and clean it up to remove all the transactions and ticket types that aren't relevant to the model. And then we add up all those transactions, and we like to have a report that's available that we can compare it to say the sum of the individual transactions adds up to a total that looks about right based on financial statements or some other audit report that we can pull out of the system. And I think if we could figure out with you which of those reports might be standardized, available out of AV7 that would be good validation tools for us, that's certainly something that would help move that along forward as well. And then one thing that came up toward the end of this process, I recall the integration, the way it's configured today, and largely I think because that's how Mervish wanted it to work, is it operates exclusively through the model pricing feature. And DCPA understood this in theory. We explained this to them right up front, but I think when it got right down to it at the 11th hour, they needed to make some adjustments to how they were using the model pricing feature so that it fit with how the integration worked with Digonex's pricing solutions. And I know, we've got a client in our pipeline, Grand Ole Opry, that seems quite interested, but they've asked, they don't use model pricing in the way that others do. They'd rather run this through the price charts or price tables. And can we do that? So that's something, and we have discussed that with Lawrence and Mike Evenson as something that's sort of out there that we'll probably need to figure out how to solve together. But I think those are all factors that we can probably standardize the process a little bit by working together and make that implementation phase more efficient.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's some opportunity there just to streamline the implementation in general. It felt like to me, just again, not being a part of it in any direct way, just hearing feedback from Simone and David and that team, that it felt like we were putting the client in an awkward spot, Denver Center at times, where they would come to me and say, Digonex is asking for this. Does this seem right? And I'm sure they were going to you and saying, well, AudienceView said this. Does this seem right? When really we probably should have our ducks in a row and just make it kind of have a plan of implementation that gets a lot of those uncertainties out of the way. So
yeah, don't disagree. It's a good
Yeah,
point.
I agree. So I think that's a takeaway for this meeting for sure. Okay, so I just wanted to go through some opportunities that are out there. Some of these are at different places, but I wanted to give you guys an overview of who we've talked to and where they are. So ATG on the UK side, we've made a couple of presentations to them. Number one, Greg presented in Toronto about 9 months ago, and then did a webinar in probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and with Vish, and I think they're maybe evaluating something internal versus transitioning to us. And then on ATG for North America. So I know Joe actually reached out to me. This was probably November, and we haven't been able to connect, but I think it was obviously for Harry Potter. So this is, and a lot of these are sort of in this camp where we have conversations and then they just stall. And so that's where ATG is. BH Live had a good presentation a while ago. And then Canadian Stage, Greg met with in Toronto about a month ago, and I don't know if you have any commentary on that, Greg.
Yeah, we're working through. I'm working with April Moon there, and there's good engagement, and I think there it's just an issue of can we, we're going back and forth on some ways to structure the project to try and make it affordable for them, given their smaller scale. So we're trying to figure out if there's a place we can meet in the middle there, which is a live conversation.
And then Geffen Playhouse, I had an in-person meeting there in last May, so it could be an opportunity for this year, but I haven't. It's another one that stalled. Greg had an in-person meeting, and Darby, thank you for pointing Crystal our way. We've had some very good meetings. Greg had an in-person meeting before the holidays, and then Greg was just invited back to Nashville in a couple weeks, and then we'll be presenting to an even larger group of decision makers. Any commentary on that, Greg?
Yeah, well, so that meeting, it's confirmed for February the 5th in Nashville. Crystal is running point on the project, if you can call it that. And two folks that she's having in the meeting on the 5th are Grant Jarnigan, who's their VP of Finance, and Pete Wyan, who's the COO, and I think Debbie, she's been in those. She's been in those. She's been in the first, and she'll be in the next one also. So hopefully that'll be moving. We'll be able to keep that one moving forward. It feels like it's on a good path.
Jefferson Live, I think I need to reconnect with them. And then Leeds, Greg had a live meeting with them. We were in the UK in November and met with them. Had a good meeting. I think it's, I don't think it's something that's going to happen. It's not quite at the same place as Grand Ole Opry is, but I think they see the value in it. In these last ones here, so Blumenthal, I met Blumenthal for the first time at Intex, and by the way, Greg and I are going to be at Intex next week for those who are there. Look forward to meeting you guys if I haven't met you already. But we met them last year at and forgot her name, but their VP of marketing.
Wendy, and she'll be there again this year. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it just seems like, there was interest there, and then the conversations just don't go anywhere. So trying to, and hopefully through the help with you guys, we can help figure this out, because I think when they saw our value proposition, there was a lot of interest, and I think they're doing a lot of the things that DCPA and Mervish were doing. They're doing, and I think we can really help them out. So, I'd like to, with a few of these here, I'd like to at least have some sort of action plan on what the best next steps are. Tony, I don't know if you're on the call or not, but I haven't heard from Becky. But Ordway, I would say, is, very, very interested. Had an in-person meeting back in June. Have had subsequent conversations, and then Tony came over here. So anyway, but Tony, I may need your help with that, and kind of getting that on the front again. And then Playhouse Square, I know that was it's a new implementation for you guys, and hopefully they've gone live and are being successful. I met Brian briefly. This was Brian Butler at Intex last year, but really felt like they wanted to keep us at arm's length until maybe the implementation went off, but certainly feel like, based on, what you've seen with DCPA and Mervish, that Playhouse Square, I think, kind of fits in that opportunity. And I remember specifically at Intex when I was talking to Brian, they've been doing manual dynamic pricing. I think it's been super painful for them. I think with when they were on Pacquiao, and it was really, really painful for them. So there seemed to be a real interest and excitement to engage. But we want to kind of work shoulder to shoulder with you guys when to bring us in. And obviously we'd like that sooner than later.
Brian and Autumn are going to be at Intix as well. Autumn's probably the right person to talk to, not
okay.
Brian. Just for your awareness, this is John, but I'm working with ATG, Blumenthal, Ordway, and Playhouse Square. I know Holly, who I don't think is on the call, is working with SHN, who's coming up, and maybe Geffen as well. But there's a whole bunch, and Holly's also going to be at Intix. So maybe it's worthwhile for us to just circle up later this week and just talk through a few of these, because I think we've got representatives from most of these or a good chunk of these organizations all at Intix, and we might be able to come up with a game plan that would work.
That'd be great, man.
Good idea, John.
I appreciate that. And then SHN, just so you guys know, I had an in-person meeting with them back in March with everybody that would be a key person at SHN. And it appeared to go very positive. I received some positive feedback, but again, it hasn't moved since then. So I'm not sure why that is. I think sometimes organizations maybe just kind of get doing what they're doing and then
I'm sorry, when did you have that meeting with them?
When was that, Greg? Probably April or May?
Yeah, they upgraded to 7, and then they put Hamilton on sale in the fall. So their dance card was very full at the end of the year. So Holly does have the account, but I'm sure they'll be ready to re-engage. I know that your name came up during many conversations, but they needed to get through that. And Hamilton starts in about 3 weeks. So again, I think it's just a matter of re-engaging with them and starting the conversation again. So. Okay.
All right. So yeah, let's talk more about that and figure out the best time. And I think, that's a lot of it is really always trying to find out the best time to engage and everything, because they are busy. And I think with Blumenthal, I think part of it too, it was Hamilton related. And so yeah, we'll have conversations after this. I just wanted to give you guys an update on who we've had in persons with. And then Lowry was another one. I had an in-person with them. Beautiful facility, really, really cool in Manchester. And it seemed like, they were actually going to make the investment to where, they weren't going to charge their clients for it. This was just going to be a value add for their clients. And they have so many one-off productions running through there where they really felt like this would be advantageous. That was in beginning of November, and haven't really engaged since then. So John, I guess any kind of guidance on that? I got an email from Brooke last week saying that they needed to get through something right now, and then they would then be ready to re-engage. But that's all.
At the moment, sorry, excuse me. At the moment, Harry, we are trying to get them over the line on signing their renewal. So they're like very close to that, but that we just have. We basically need to sort out their upgrade to version 7 is what we need to do.
Got it.
So we are still that's still an active conversation, I would say. And I will be, I'm in contact with them a lot at the moment, so I'll make sure that's alive as far as that's concerned. If I hear anything back about, this, I think they probably would keep this on a separate stream from what they're doing with us, but it is obviously pertinent to what's going on.
Yes.
And I'm in active conversations with them all the time on a day-to-day basis, so for their other operational things outside of that renewal. So I'm expecting to be on site with them in the next, let me think, ideally it's a week on Friday, but I may need to change that date to the following week. So within the next 2 weeks, I should be seeing them in person, and I can certainly talk to you after that.
That would be great. Let's plan on it. Beautiful. And then, and Greg and I are going to be at TPC as well, by the way.
Great. Yeah. I have a meeting later today to discuss who we have on site for that. But yeah, I'm imagining I'll be around for that as well, and we can pick out any of these customers that are going to be there to have a conversation with. Yeah,
and we're actually presenting there.
Right.
It's going to be, I think, Greg, it's still focused on attractions, but I think there may be some adjustments to that as well, to where we can broaden that, maybe.
Yeah, I think the organizers were particularly interested in the fact that we did dynamic pricing for attractions, because they told us that they'd received feedback from that side of the base that there wasn't enough content specifically geared to them.
Yeah.
But the organizer had a chance to see our presentation to a performing arts group and came up to me afterward and said that he'd like to make sure we cover the performing arts side as well. So we'll certainly cover both while we're there.
Is that Andrew Thomas you've been dealing with?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I know Andrew very well. Anything we can do, I think the other side of that is anything we can do to help push your session would probably be a good thing too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Just incidentally on leads, I think you didn't mention leads, but is there anything ongoing conversation with them at the moment? Because I'm actually up there tomorrow.
Yeah. This is Greg. I took the meeting at Leeds. Seemed like a very good meeting. They had two concerns. One was just how they fit it into their budget. And 1B was the fact that they needed the API, and they were concerned about what that would cost them, and the AudienceView API, and whether that was manageable for them as well. So
okay, I've actually
like
already
a good conversation, but they were hesitant based on cost at the time.
I've actually already gone back to them about the API. So when did I speak to them about that? There were some questions that came through specifically about the API. Where are we? Yeah, sort of mid-December time. So I'll raise that with Amy tomorrow and find out what she's thinking.
Yeah, it was Rachel and I believe Amy as well who were in the room.
Yeah, I'm seeing both of them tomorrow, so hopefully we'll pick that conversation up then.
Well,
Great.
tell them I say hello.
Great, I will do.
Okay. Well, thanks, John. Any other commentary from anybody? Any questions? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to go through just a few things, just so you guys know, when your clients ask you, okay, what is it that Digonex is actually bringing to the table, and then how much heavy lifting it is for us. And so in terms of our deliverables, we deliver and develop the algorithm and the solutions for the clients. We give the price recommendations through seats that you saw today. We're going to, implement and maintain that data exchange process with you guys. So we work, we work with them and you guys on that. Any kind of support for seats. And then the solution refinement and enhancement. So if there are some goals or some changes within the solution, we can adjust the solution based on where we are. If you remember, Greg talked about, we thought it was going to be revenue maximization, but then it turns out to be butts and seats, and that's kind of what we need there. Again, you have an account manager, and then you have a PhD economist that's assigned to them. And then we'll deal with some other kind of ad hoc things as requested. We always want to be a good partner to the clients and help them out in any way we can. And then the biggest thing for the clients is, initially, of course, that onboarding and working shoulder to shoulder with the implementation, and then answering those scoping questions, and typically, an internal point of contact. In the DCPA's case, it ended up being Simone. But those are the biggest things for the clients. But I thought just showing this slide might be helpful for you guys. And then in terms of fee structures, the fees are going to be different per organization, but I at least wanted to show what the different options are. So there's one where it's a fixed annual fee, and this is probably what DCPA is going to do this year, where this kind of option is one fee. If it's a cup, 2 or 3 different theaters, it would be by theater, but a fixed annual fee. And then that's going to, the nice thing about this and what our clients typically like is it gives them predictability for any kind of annual expenditures. This next option is what, I think we came up with for Mirvish and initially for DCPA, is where there's a smaller annual fixed fee per theater, and then for each performance there would be a per week fee for when the performance is going on. So for instance, if it's Hello Dolly, and Hello Dolly is a 3-week run, then let's just say, for instance, we're charging the organization $1,500 per week. It's a 3-week run. So Hello Dolly would be $4,500. And so so there would be that I call it smaller fixed fee per theater, and that would be for the entire season, and then the performance fee per week. And so what the organizations like, especially as they're getting used to us, and I think for DCPA this definitely rang true, is it's going to give them flexibility with the producers on when to dial us up and dial us down. And you know, with some it could be used as a pass-through expense. It also could be used as a value add, you know, however they want to do it. But it just really gives them the organizations flexibility in controlling the expenses. And I know I've had conversations with Tony. And Tony, I'm not sure if you're on or not, but I know that, you know, as you're, you know, sitting in your old role, you really like this type of approach to doing it. So either way, it works for us. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay.
Yep.
All right. And this is just, you know, what an implementation roadmap looks like. You know, just and I think John, to your point, I think we can tighten this up a little more in terms of exactly how to make this more specific to AudienceView, because this is pretty generic. But you know, the biggest thing is understanding what the scope of work that we're going to be doing through the scoping questions and what kind of constraints they have. Getting that historical data. It never fails that we're going to have questions that come out of the data. So understanding that, and then we have our data team that actually organize the data in a way to present to our economists so they can provide the analysis and start building the algorithm. You know, we'll test the algorithm and make sure the integration is working properly. If there are any kind of operational considerations that they need to have, then certainly do it. We found with live entertainment that that's typically not the case because they're already doing some sort of dynamic pricing. We're just offering a much better way to do it. And then any client training or anything. And then, so typically, you know, we're looking at around 13 weeks to do this. And I think as we get these processes between AudienceView and Digonex tightened up, I think that 13 weeks can tighten up a little bit more as well. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Harry. That was, thank you. Thanks, Greg and Chris as well. That was very informative.
Was it helpful, everyone?
Very.
Did you learn things today that you weren't quite sure of before?
I certainly learned more with the case studies, so that was awesome, and I liked the quantitative aspects that we can share with the customers about revenue, and I think they'll see a lot of value in that.
Okay.
It's also
Good.
helpful to see which counts are somewhere in your pipeline as well. I think some of those have been lost on our team a little bit, so it's good for the refresher as well, because we're having conversations with these folks all the time, and sometimes it's a little unclear as to which partners they've been talking with and which ones maybe just slipped off their radar or things got busy and they dropped it. It's good to be able to remind them in our conversations as well and just get a sense for where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Anything else? All right.
Thank you so much, Harry and team. That was great. We'll get the recording sent out to those who couldn't make it. And we have some meetings that we'll schedule for you guys so you can chat with some of the CSMs before Intex.
That would be great.
And other than that, thank you everyone for the time. This was really awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.